Phoenix Suns have an abundance of players that possibly could accept a player option, and one is returning in Damion Lee. The point guard who had a meniscus injury was out the entire season is coming back. Could he be that spark plug, that scoring, that point guard replacement the Suns desperately need to help this big three push for a championship that Matt Ishbia and James Jones see in the sights of the Suns? We'll be breaking down all of that and more on this episode of Suns Digest. I'm Bruce Velez. But before we dive in, before we get into all of this news, 81% of you guys who watch our videos are not subscribed. And CJ and I appreciate that number dwindling down every upload. If you want to make sure you stay up to date on the Suns daily, getting all the news from rumors, free agency, draft, leading up to the season, this is the spot for you. Hit that subscribe button. Without further ado, though, let's dive into the topic at hand today. Make sure to grab a snack as it's going to be a jam-packed episode. And like I mentioned in the introduction, Damion Lee will be returning and will be staying with this Phoenix squad this season. If we want to look at the update from Evan Sidery, we can see from this tweet that Damion Lee will exercise his $2.8 million player option to stay with the Phoenix Suns. He missed all of last season due to that meniscus injury, and based on how this Phoenix roster shakes out, Damion Lee could earn a rotation spot. And as we've broken down, as we've kind of gotten on Suns Digest, the Suns desperately need that point guard. Now, Lee obviously played with the Suns the season prior, but could be, a good caliber piece off the bench, or could be, that playmaking point guard that the Suns do look at. We'll be diving into that a little bit later in this video. But as we all know, this Suns team is strapped to the brim with cap space, and to make changes, to make adjustments, it is going to be a tough road for this Suns team. So bringing back Damion Lee kind of solves an issue there and kind of already hits the nail on one of the coffins. As you already know, we've already looked and broken down this off-season outlook, but this is courtesy of Bobby Marks. The Suns have $209 million already committed in salary, which puts them about $20 million over the second apron. Now, unless the Suns were able to possibly salary dump Yusuf Nurkic, possibly move off one of those end rotation guys, then the Suns can't get under the second apron. As we all know, they're not trading anybody from the big three. Therefore, the Suns lose the non-tax mid-level exception. They lose a bunch of ways to acquire players and doing trades with salary dumping and moving off contracts, and it really limits the Suns in ways to improve this roster. As we know, you can look at the key free agents, Royce O'Neal, Bull, and with Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, Josh Okogie, and Damion Lee all having player options, this team has a lot of uncertainties going into next year. In our video yesterday, we broke it down. CJ talked about how Drew Eubanks declined his player option, and I broke down in a video a couple days ago how Eric Gordon is 50-50 on deciding with his. We have no news about Josh Okogie, but like we mentioned, Damion Lee will be coming back, will be returning with this Phoenix Suns squad. And that kind of gets into our next point here, which first I want to know what you guys think of Damion Lee coming back, but it goes into the next point here, which kind of breaks down what does this mean for the Phoenix Suns. Now, we've broken down that the Suns, if they want to contend, if they want Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant to have this playoff deep run, they're going to have to make some moves around the edges. We want to look at the salary cap. KD, Beal, Booker already tied up. Royce O'Neal expected to re-sign. We broke that in a video a couple weeks ago. And Grayson Allen obviously got his extension at the end of last season, which ultimately makes him untradeable from the Phoenix Suns for 6 months. So he's not tradable until the trade deadline. That, like I said, really ultimately leaves Yusuf Nurkic, Nazir Little, who was a young, not really projected, but hasn't had that much promise in the NBA, but could blossom finally on a new team coming over in that DeAndre Ayton trade with Yusuf Nurkic. But those two guys, if we can attach some draft capital or possibly even salary dump them or move those guys off, then the Suns might have some flexibility. But ultimately, at that point, it really does limit them. Now, bringing back a guy in Damion Lee could be successful. Like we mentioned, they need some rebounding. They need some help down low. They need up some point guard play. They need some facilitation to really set up this offense, regardless if it's a starting point guard or a bench point guard. And we're going to kind of dive into what Damion Lee can really bring for this Phoenix Suns team. So we want to look at his regular season averages. Obviously, he didn't play last season due to that meniscus injury, but in the year previous, he averaged around 8 points on around 45% shooting from the field, 45% shooting from three, and 90% from three-point range, averaging around 4 rebounds and 1.5 assists per game. Ultimately, not a bad scoring plug. Obviously, not off the bench. Not obviously, he would be a great, really good contributor on the offensive side for this Phoenix Suns team on the bench. But as we mentioned, and we've kind of broken down, Beal, Booker, Grayson Allen, those are kind of, are already scores on the bench. And if they do bring back Royce O'Neal, and regardless what they do with Yusuf Nurkic, if they bring him back this year or if they do trade him, the starting lineup for the Phoenix Suns most likely will be Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, obviously Royce O'Neal, Kevin Durant, and insert said center, regardless if it's Nurkic or if it's whoever they replace him with. That ultimately leads you with Grayson Allen then coming off the bench as your sixth man, and Damion Lee being another contributor, as we know, coming off the bench for sure. Even if he gets into that rotation, even if he fights himself to find some minutes to be able to do that, his role is already kind of compromised with guys similarly like him. Guys like Booker, like Beal, have that better offensive ability. Same thing with Grayson Allen, who's a little bit bigger, and especially coming off this injury, I don't know how well it's going to work out for a guy in Damion Lee. Ultimately, it is the smart decision for him, and I do believe that he made the right decision as he didn't play last year. And with the NBA having so much promise in the draft, with younger players becoming better and better at such young ages, and obviously with having injuries and they can set you back, this is some injury. This is some insurance for Damion Lee. He at least gets one more year in the NBA. He gets one more year to prove himself. And if he does blossom, if he does still look solid, maybe a team can offer him a contract, and it looks like a little bit of a revival for Damion Lee. If not, at least he gets one final year in the NBA because it's going to be tough to negotiate a contract if he didn't even play that season, especially coming off a meniscus injury, which is definitely not great. But ultimately, I do think that Damion Lee possibly could bring some spark for the Suns bench as a scoring plug, but I still think that they'll still have to look at the need for a, playmaking, facilitating point guard, some rebounding, and some rim protection at the center position. But ultimately, if Damion Lee does look solid and he does look good on this team, they could use him in a trade similarly to the Cameron Payne and Patrick Beverley deal of this trade deadline. The Bucks needed more defense. The Sixers needed another scorer. They switched basically to, I guess, unconventional role players who were making around $2 million for each other. And even though the Sixers or the Bucks, they were both eliminated in the first round, didn't have a long playoff run, I think that that type of trade helped out both squads. Patrick Beverley was another playmaker, facilitator, and help out alongside Damian Lillard. Was that scrappy, tenacious defender that you need at the guard position to kind of help you out and get your other guards like Beasley and Damian Lillard locked in. And a guy like Cameron Payne was another shooter to put alongside Joel Embiid, seemingly could play off ball alongside Tyrese Maxey and could realistically help out both squads. I think that the Suns, if Damian Lee even performs to a decent a bit for this squad, and they still don't have the role for him, they could look for a trade similarly to that, where they trade him for a guy like Patrick Beverley or Cameron Payne, not saying that exactly, but in another role to then aid the Suns in maybe rebounding or playmaking or an extra wing body. And then that other team gets a guy in Damian Lee who is that spark plug scorer, is that point guard, or, 12 points off the bench that you could have. And maybe that's what they necessarily need. Ultimately, I think that if with the Suns keeping him, it may not be the best because he might not be the most impact player as of right now that we're believing in coming off of an injury. But if he does stay locked in, can be that offensive piece, he could be a nice scoring plug for us off the bench. But even if not, he could be used as a tradable contract down at the trade deadline, down in the future for the Phoenix Suns, and finding another role player, another role piece that could hopefully bring a banner to Phoenix. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What are your guys' thoughts on Damion Lee coming back to the Phoenix Suns? Like I mentioned, if you want to stay up to date on everything revolving around this Suns team throughout the entire offseason, the draft is a week away, and we're going to have everything breaking down, covering this Phoenix Suns squad from CJ and myself. So if you want to stay up to date, we're going to be starting doing live streams shortly as well. We'll get you guys with that as well. We really do appreciate that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're on our goal to 1,000 subscribers, and we can't do it without your guys' help. You guys have been amazing supporting us already. We really do appreciate everything that you guys have given us so far. Once again, I'm Bruce Veliz. I want to say thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Suns Digest. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and have a great rest of your day. Go Phoenix Suns.